Hello, my name is Nathan Tindel, and today I'm going to be telling you the story of Joseph, found in the Bible. I'm going to gear this story towards early elementary age children. There once was a man named Jacob. Jacob had 12 sons. The oldest was Reuben, then Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Joseph, and Benjamin, the youngest. Joseph was Jacob's favorite son. He even gave him a very fancy coat with many colors on it. His brothers were very jealous of him. Joseph would tell them about dreams he had. One dream had him and his brothers gathering grain and putting them in bundles. When they finished, all of his brothers' bundles gathered around Joseph's bundle and bowed down to it. His brothers thought this meant that he thought he was better than them. They did not like Joseph at all. One day they were out in the fields with their goats, and Jacob sends Joseph to go check on them. When they see Joseph coming, they are not happy. "Oh, great, here comes the dreamer," said one. "I wish he would go away forever," said another. The third brother had an idea. "Why don't we grab him and throw him in that pit over there? Then we'll leave him there and never have to see him again." Brothers agreed this is a good idea. So when Joseph gets there, they grab him, they pull his coat of many colors off of him, and they throw him in the pit. Then they see men passing by at a distance. These men bought and sold people as slaves. The brothers decided they could sell Joseph as a slave and be rid of him. So they do. As the men are taking Joseph away, his brothers take his coat of many colors, they tear it, they put blood on it, and they tell their father Joseph was eaten by a wild animal. When Joseph gets to the land of Egypt, he is sold as a slave to Potiphar, the captain of the royal guard. Joseph is a very good servant, and Potiphar soon puts Joseph in charge of his entire household. Potiphar doesn't have to worry about anything because he knows he can trust Joseph. Potiphar's wife has a crush on Joseph, and one day when they're alone in the house, she goes up to Joseph and she asks him if she can be his secret girlfriend. Joseph wants to honor his master Potiphar, so he refuses. She's not happy. She screams, and Joseph pulls away from her, leaving his coat in her arms. The servants come. Potiphar comes home, and she tells them that Joseph attacked her. So Potiphar has to send Joseph to jail. Joseph is in jail for many years, but he's a very good prisoner. So the jailer puts Joseph in charge of all the other prisoners. The jailer doesn't have to worry about anything. He knows he can trust Joseph. One day, two men are sent to jail by Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. They both worked for him. One was the royal baker and one was the royal butler. One night they both had dreams, and they didn't know what they meant. They were talking to Joseph, and Joseph prayed to God for an answer. God gave Joseph an answer, and Joseph tells the men what their dreams mean. He tells the butler that after 3 days, Pharaoh is going to take him out of prison and give him his old job back. Joseph asks the butler to remember him when he's with Pharaoh because he's innocent and he doesn't want to be in jail anymore. Joseph tells the baker that his dream means that in 3 days, Pharaoh will decide that the baker will never be free ever again. 3 days later, it happens exactly the way Joseph says. But the butler does not remember Joseph. 2 years later, Pharaoh has a dream. He's very concerned, and he asks all of his wise men and advisors what it means, but they don't know what it means. Then the butler remembers Joseph. He tells Pharaoh about Joseph. Pharaoh immediately calls for Joseph to be brought to him. When Joseph gets to the Pharaoh tells him his dream. There were 7 cows. They were very fat and healthy looking. And then behind them came 7 very skinny ugly, sick-looking cows, and the skinny cows ate the fat cows, but they stayed skinny. "What does it mean?" he asked Joseph. Joseph prays to God, and God gives him an answer. Joseph tells Pharaoh that his dream means that there will be 7 years of plenty in Egypt, where the food will grow very, very well. There will be lots of food in Egypt, an abundance of food. Then, after the 7 years, there will be 7 years of famine, where the food will not grow at all, and there will be no rain. "What should we do?" Pharaoh asked Joseph. Joseph says, "You should hire someone to gather all the extra food up and store it somewhere so that we will have food that we can sell to the people during the 7 years of famine." Pharaoh likes this idea, and he decides Joseph is the perfect man for the job. So Pharaoh hires Joseph and makes him the governor of Egypt. He puts him in charge of the whole land. Pharaoh doesn't have to worry about anything. He knows he can trust Joseph. At the end of the 7 years of plenty, there's so much extra food stored up that when the famine starts, Joseph can sell the food not just to the Egyptian people, but to people from other lands too, including his father's family. Jacob's family is running out of food, so Jacob sends his 10 oldest sons to go to Egypt and buy more food. So his brothers come before the governor of Egypt, who is Joseph. They bow down to him. They don't recognize him. He's dressed up in his fancy Egyptian clothes, but he recognizes them right away. He decides to test them. So he sells them food. Then he claims that they are spies. They tell him they're not. They're honest men. They tell him about his father back home. They tell him about their brother back home and their other brother who is gone. Joseph is happy to hear about his brother Benjamin, and he wants to see him. So he tells them, "I'm going to arrest Simeon and put him in jail. And if you go home and bring back Benjamin and let me see him, then I'll believe you are honest men, and I'll let Simeon go." So they go home. They tell their father about what the governor of Egypt told them. But Jacob does not want to let Benjamin go. So Jacob refuses. A few years later, they start running out of food again. They bought a lot of food, but they couldn't last forever. Jacob wants to send them back to Egypt, but they said, "The governor won't see us unless we bring Benjamin." One of the older brothers, Judah, promises Jacob that he will bring Benjamin back. And if he doesn't, Jacob can be mad at him forever. Jacob knows they need food, so he agrees to let Benjamin go. When they go back before the governor of Egypt, Joseph, when he sees Benjamin, he is so happy. He throws a feast for them. He gives Benjamin 5 times more food than anyone else. He lets Simeon out of prison. He sells them more food, and he lets them go. But he has one of his men put his royal cup in Benjamin's bag. Then his guards chase them down and bring them back. He accuses them of stealing from him. When they look in their bags, they find the royal cup in Benjamin's bag. Joseph says, "You can go, but Benjamin's going to stay here as my servant because he stole from me." The men insist, his brothers insist, "We did not steal." And Judah says, "Please take me instead of Benjamin because I promised my father I would bring him back." Joseph realizes that his brothers have changed. They feel sorry for what they've done before, and they would protect their youngest brother. So Joseph tells them, "It's me. I'm your brother Joseph." They don't believe him at first, but he convinces them. And they all gather together. They're so happy to see him. He tells them, "Go home to my father, tell him I'm alive, and tell him that the whole family's invited to live in Egypt." They do. And Jacob and the rest of the family come to Egypt, and they live there for many generations. The end.